Looks like we're good to go, Chris.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Hutton. I'm a community planning coordinator for the municipality of North Cowichan. I'm very pleased to start off this webinar this evening. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that I myself am speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Cowichan people. I'm happy to live, work, and play here. Acknowledge that North Cowichan, the entire boundary sits upon the land of the traditional territory of the Cowichan people. I'm going to just start us off with some introductions for who's on the webinar in terms of panelists tonight. I'll start off with maybe our North Cowichan staff here. Rob Conway is the Director of Planning and Building. Rob, maybe you could unmute and say hello so we can see your face on active speaker view.
Hello, everyone. Rob Conway, North Cowichan's Director of Planning and Building.
Thanks, Rob. Next, I'll introduce Ender McDuff, is the Chair of the OCP Advisory Committee at North Cowichan.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Also with us from the OCP Advisory Committee is Mona Kaiser.
Hello, everyone.
And from MODIS, Planning, Engagement, and Design, who are the consultants for this official community plan project. We have Rob Bars, partner at MODIS.
Good evening, everybody.
As well as Susie Lunn, senior planner at MODIS.
Hi there.
So we also have Mackenzie Fleming here this evening, and Mackenzie is providing technical support. So if you can find her name in the drop down in the chat, if you're having any technical issues, including audio or anything like that, please feel free to chat with Mackenzie, and I think she'll be putting her email in the chat at some point. Mackenzie, if you don't mind saying hello.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'll put that email in there. You're more than welcome to contact me if you run into any tech issues. Happy to help out.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to now turn this meeting over to Ender McDuff, who will just run us through give us a brief overview of the OCP Advisory Committee's role and their input into the growth scenario process. Thanks, Ender.
Great, thank you, and good evening again. As already mentioned, my name is Ender McDuff, and I'm currently the chair of the OCP Advisory Committee. And I've been asked tonight to just sort of explain what that is and what our input was into this process. As I'm sure most of you are aware, since you're coming to this, the official community plan, or OCP, is a very expansive document. So it covers a lot of specific stuff like land management. And it also gives broader principles for what the community's character is and what its values are. And because of that, in this process, Municipal Council decided to create an advisory committee that would have volunteer members who would represent different perspectives or different expertise to bring to this update process where we're updating the OCP. And so this includes everyone from healthcare professionals to farmers and just sort of everyone in between who makes up the Cowichan Valley, in North Cowichan specifically. And so this committee was tasked with discussing specific substantive parts of the OCP itself, and then also discussing these community engagement initiatives. And so we took a role since about early February in helping to develop the growth management scenarios that are going to be discussed tonight. And so in that process, you'll hear about this all, or you can hear about later from Mona, who's here to answer your questions later on during the Q&A. But we had a working group on the project. We discussed what growth scenarios might look like that would still be in line with North Cowichan's character and with our values. And hopefully these will serve as sort of starting points for the discussion tonight. And with that, I think that's really all about the advisory committee. Again, Mona will be here to answer questions involving that process, should you have them. And I look forward to hearing all of your input later on, so thanks.
Thank you, Ender. It's very helpful. The OCP Advisory Committee has been a really key part of this project, and always good to work with them. So next up, we are going to move into Actually, I'm going to let Susie just kind of host the balance of this meeting. She'll be taking us through a few polling questions and explain how the polling works before we do that. And then her and Rob Bars will take us through a brief summary and a presentation, which is kind of the heart of the information aspect of the evening. So go ahead, Susie.
Great. Well, I'm going to hand it over to Rob because, yeah, he's going to share his screen and walk us through the format of tonight's webinar, and then it'll come back to me.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ender. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, nice to have this opportunity to present the work of the last few months. And I really want to thank the OCP Advisory Committee and the working group for the work that they've done on this process. It's been a very collaborative process with the working group, and yeah, we've had a lot of good input, a lot of great perspectives during the development of this work. So thank you very much, and Mona, and all the rest of the Advisory Committee. Okay, so I'm going to try to just share my screen here so we can get the presentation going. And if someone could just let me know that you can see that. Susie, are you able to see
Rob.
that?
Yeah,
okay, perfect.
Oh, actually, Rob, we can see your notes screen for some reason now. You had it just before, right when I spoke. It moved over for some reason.
That's interesting. Okay. Going to have to swap displays. Tell me if this works.
That's good. Yeah,
that's good. Okay, great. So for our presentation tonight, we are going to start with a little bit of an overview of the official community plan process. Susie will take you through the draft vision and goals and principles that have been developed for the OCP so far. Susie will take you through the community character study. So for each of the key communities within North Cowichan, we've had a process where we've looked at the key aspects of the community character and summarized those in a report. So we'll share a little bit of that, excuse me. And then the main focus of tonight is this question of how should North Cowichan grow? And so growth management is a really important part of any OCP. How do we manage that growth, and how do we translate it into a land use plan? So we'll present 3 scenarios for you. And at the end of that, there'll be an opportunity for questions and comments. And then, of course, there is the opportunity for you to comment on those growth scenarios through a survey, and we'll let you know about how you can do that. So I do just want to let everybody know that we are recording the webinar tonight, and it will be uploaded to North Cowichan's website following this event. So before we get into the presentation, we have a couple of questions for you. So we're really interested to see who's attending tonight. So we have a poll question, and the question is, which community do you live in? So on your screen, you should see appear a question, and you can respond. And I see people are already responding, so that's great. So if you could just let us know which of these communities do you currently live in? And Mackenzie, I'm not sure if you're able to figure out, oh, I see, yeah, it tells us how many people have voted. So 36 of 46, just looking for a few more votes if you do want to respond to this. It's not obligatory, but it would be nice to know who we're hearing from. And if you don't live in North Cowichan, that's totally fine. There is an option out to say that at the bottom, outside of North Cowichan, or if you work in North Cowichan. Okay, looks like we've stalled out at 80% of the vote, so that's great. So we have about 8% of people from South End Centre and University Village, about 8% from Berkey's Corner, 8% from Bell McKinnon, quite a lot of people, 21% from Cowichan Lake area, same for Maple Bay, 1 person from Crofton, 13% from Chemainus, and the rest, 18%, from the rural areas of North Cowichan. Okay, wonderful. Thanks for doing that, folks. Okay, let's go on to our second question. And I need to advance the slide. Okay, so the second question is, which of the following OCP update engagement opportunities have you participated in to date? We'd love to know your answers to that, just to see how involved you've been to this point. And of course, you can choose multiple answers here. And looks like we're just getting a few more votes in. Okay, so we've got about 30 people have responded here. So here are our results. So we have 53% of folks have participated in the Vision, Principles, and Goals survey that we did early on. The same number in the Community Character survey. 30% participated in the Community Character Dialogue. So we had a series of workshops to discuss community character for each of the communities, and 40% in the Growth Management survey. Okay, wonderful stuff. Thank you, folks. So I'm going to go on to the next part of the presentation here. So I'm going to turn it over to Susie to take us through the process.
Great, thanks, Rob. And okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about where we are in terms of the official community plan update process. So phase one, the first part of the update for the official community plan was launched back in the winter of 2019. And Modus was hired early in 2020. And so we had started doing some project planning and doing our background research. And then, of course, we all know what happened in February, March of last year, and that's when COVID hit. So we had to kind of regroup and pivot in terms of what we were thinking for the work planning, particularly around community engagement. Had to move most of our engagement online. We had been planning much more in-person type stuff, but along with the rest of the world, that wasn't possible. So so after kind of regrouping with staff, we developed a new work plan, and then we moved into the vision and goals and principles phase of the process. So we conducted a survey and talked with the community ambassadors and OCP advisory committee about what that part of the process looks like. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that in the next slide, because it's such an important foundational piece to the overall OCP update, but also to the growth management phase as well. And then more recently, as Rob mentioned, we did a little bit of exploration around community character and what that means for each of the communities in North Cowichan. And we hosted dialogues and did a survey. And now, of course, we're into the growth management phase of the OCP update. And that will continue into June, when the survey is open until June 6th. And then after that, we'll move into actually updating the OCP policy chapters, the overall OCP. And then through the fall, we'll finalize that. And then our hope is by next February that it will be before council for their consideration. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so I really want to take the opportunity just to just to do a little bit of a report back on what we heard from community members during the vision, principles, and goals stage of the OCP update. We had lots of respondents. We had over 1,200 surveys completed, so it was amazing to see all the great comments, and you know, all the people that participated in that survey gave us some really good information, as I say, to lay the foundation for moving forward. Now, these principles and goals and vision, they're still in draft form. They have gone in front of council, but they are still in draft form. They won't be finalized until council actually considers the whole of the OCP document, but we wanted to take this opportunity to review them with you at this point, and also because they are foundational to the growth management piece as well, and has really helped to shape our thinking in terms of how we want to move forward with the growth scenarios and the land use plan. So we'll go to the next slide. So the draft vision, and this was based on the 1,200 responses that we received. We also workshopped this with the OCP Advisory Committee and made changes based on their comment. So I'll read that out. North Cowichan's unique communities are set in spectacular natural environments defined by forests, rivers, lakes, and coastlines, and farmland. As a steward and leader of environmental and social well-being, we will prioritize the conservation of our natural areas, provide supports for a thriving local economy, and foster resilient, welcoming, and inclusive communities. Our decisions and relationships will be collaborative, transparent, and demonstrate resilience in the face of future challenges and opportunities. So we'll go to the next slide. So these are the titles, the bolded titles from the draft principles. If you want to go on to North Cowichan's website, and we can put that link in the chat. We have a full report that speaks to the more specific details of each of these principles. But I didn't want to spend too much time on them tonight. But I'll just highlight them for you. So we have sustainability and interdependence, economic opportunity, healthy and safe communities, community engagement, reconciliation and relationship building, change, adaptation, and resilience, responding to climate change, responsible governance and active leadership, and social justice and equity. And the draft goals, which has provided a framework for the growth scenarios, are as followed. Focus growth and development in established centers to strengthen our vibrant community while maintaining individual character. Livable, compact communities will preserve natural and rural areas and encourage climate-friendly and active ways to move around. Development will occur in a low-impact, site-adaptive manner, integrating natural features and ecological systems. The second goal is to build resilient, supportive, inclusive communities that enhance health and well-being and provide opportunities in recreation, arts, culture, and access to nature. The third one is to encourage and enable a diverse mix of housing types, tenures, and levels of affordability to accommodate the needs of the community. And the fourth one, we'll go to the next. Oh yeah, we're there. The fourth one is to enhance our natural environment by protecting and regenerating our rural countryside, forests, rivers, lakes, and oceans. The fifth one is to enhance food security in North Cowichan by encouraging local food production and protecting farmable land. The sixth is to support a thriving economy that focuses on sustainable jobs and local businesses, including green technologies and innovative agriculture, which leads to meaningful work and prosperity for all and responds to regional economic change. And lastly, prioritize climate action by reducing energy consumption and emissions, and adapting to climate change. So another foundational piece to this growth management stage of the project is the community character study. As Rob said, we spent some time in November. Actually, the survey was open from November to February, and we asked community members to fill out a series of questions relating to the character of the community in terms like the physical character of the buildings and the streets and the plazas, the gathering places, and in addition to kind of the landscape character, the natural features that they admire as well. So we had some amazing photos that got submitted by the survey, and lots of really interesting comments and reflections from community members. We also hosted 2 community dialogues in January. This was a very interactive session where people got to meet with their fellow community members in kind of separate breakout rooms, and we used graphic facilitators help document this process, and came up again with some really interesting discussion and lots of good commentary about what was important to community members in terms of what they value for their community. And then as a result of that, we drafted 8 character profiles based on the feedback and some further research that we did. And they were just recently reviewed by the community ambassadors, which are another group of community members that were appointed by North Cowichan to help with this process. And so those character profiles will be presented to Council on June 8th. And then we will make further revisions, finalize those, and then upload those to the web and share them with you so that, yeah, all the community members can have a look as well. Yeah, and I just wanted to share this graphic there. We have an amazing graphic facilitator and artist who works with us at Modus, and she documented some of the conversations in her, in her with her artistic interpretation, and yeah, it was a really fun process, and that will also be shared on the web as well with the profiles. All right, we'll hand it back to Rob now.
Great, thank you very much, Susie. Okay, so the next part of the presentation is really focused on this question of growth management, and we're going to present you with the draft growth management scenarios. So when we talk about growth in a community, we're really talking about a combination of increased population, but also the development residential and employment related development that comes with that population growth. And so growth management is the practice of planning for and controlling the location, density, and type of land use and development in a community. So essentially we're trying to manage where that growth goes and hopefully increase the public benefits arising from growth and mitigate any negative impacts. And those negative impacts can be things like health, asset management costs, so the infrastructure cost to service the growth, and of course, environmental impacts and traffic impacts, things like that. So we're trying to boost the positive benefits and minimize the negative impacts. That's the point of growth management. And it's a really important tool within OCPs. It's one of the key tools that we are trying to, that we use to try and manage those benefits in an OCP. So we've prepared, as I mentioned, some growth scenario concepts. So growth scenarios are a tool to really engage with yourselves, with the community members of North Cowichan, on what types of growth patterns you would like to see for your community and various communities. So the scenarios are not final at the moment. They are very much in draft form, and the whole point of tonight and the survey that we have, we're putting out is to really seek seek your input on these. So each of the scenarios seeks to outline different strategies, basically a different growth management philosophy. And what we're expecting is that we'll get some comments, and what we're hoping for is that we'll get some comments on each one of them. Maybe things that you like about the growth scenario, maybe things that you don't like and would like to see changed. And then as a result, we will take all that input and create a final scenario and turn that into a land use plan and a set of growth management policies, which will be embedded into the new OCP. So as you can see, really important piece of the work on the OCP update. So these scenarios were created through some work that the consultants and staff did initially, and then we have taken that to council and got their feedback. We've then had meetings with the OCP advisory committee, including a specific working group. So we kind of had a subcommittee essentially of the advisory committee that was really focused purely on these growth scenarios. They gave us some great input, feedback, guidance, and then we took it back to the committee, and along the way I've had various technical input and support from North Cowichan staff, including Chris and Rob, who are here tonight. So it's been very much a collaborative exercise to get us to this point. So just to give you some perspective on kind of what kind of growth are we anticipating. Rennie Analytics did a study a couple of years ago for the CVRD that really helped us understand the extent of population and housing and job growth within the whole region, and also specifically their study looked at North Cowichan and the other various communities within the region. So for North Cowichan, roughly at the last census and today you have a population of just under 30,000 people, and that is expected to grow to 38,000 or a little bit more by 2050. So a growth of about 9,000 people. So that translates into an increase in housing units of about 12,800 today to 16,500 by 2050. So about 3,800 new housing units. And a housing unit, basically a home, a dwelling, could be a single family dwelling or a multi-family apartment or townhouse or duplex. Those are referred to as housing units. Similarly, we can expect the jobs in North Cowichan to grow from 11,300 today to about 14,500 by 2050. So a growth of just over 3,000 jobs by 2050. So that's the kind of extent of growth we're expecting. Now, these projections were done a couple of years ago, and we have had various comments from council and others really signaling that that growth actually might be more at the moment, that during this period of the pandemic, there's actually been an increased interest in people moving to rural or semi-rural places like North Cowichan. So that might be a bit of an underestimate based on what we understand today in terms of the demand for homes within your wonderful community. The other thing that I wanted to point out today is what we call the urban containment boundary. And so back in 2011, when the last OCP was done, an urban containment boundary was established. And this is this thick black line that you can see drawn around the various communities of Chemainus and Crofton and the whole South End area. And so what this is essentially a way of constraining growth by constraining the infrastructure and servicing needed to support urban levels of development. So essentially, it's the boundary where municipal sewers go to, and beyond that boundary, everything is pretty much, with a couple of exceptions, pretty much serviced by septic systems. So outside of these boundaries, you tend to get much lower density growth, kind of rural lots and hobby farms and agricultural land, as well as the municipal forest. So essentially, for all the scenarios we're going to show you tonight, most of the growth, way more than 95% of the growth, is focused within this 2011 urban containment boundary. So we're not anticipating really any significant growth outside of that area. There may be things like, you know, small subdivisions or lot splits within the rural area, but it's anticipated to be a very, very low proportion of the overall growth in each of the scenarios. The other thing we wanted to point out is, of course, that a lot of North Cowichan's land area consists of agricultural land, much of it in the ALR, as well as the municipal forest reserve and other forested lands, and a whole series of natural ecosystems, many of which are in an environmental development permit area, along with other rural areas. And so, you know, a great deal of the percentage of the overall landmass is really protected from growth, or expected to see very little growth over the next 30 years. Now, growth is important because how and where we build new housing and place jobs impacts biodiversity and ecosystems. So, of course, when development occurs, it can have a negative impact on biodiversity and the health of the ecosystem. So we have to do it very carefully and consider where it goes very carefully. It also can have an impact on climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, because the more dispersed the growth, generally, the more likely it is that people will be traveling by vehicles, and therefore emitting larger amounts of fossil fuels. So they're less likely to walk or take transit if they're living in a dispersed area. And that can also affect traffic volumes and flows as well. The other thing, of course, we have to consider is housing affordability. There has been a housing needs assessment done recently for North Cowichan and the CBRD, and so we have to think about housing affordability. There's increasing home prices in the area because of increased demand, and we can also think about the energy efficiency of those homes. So depending on the home type, it might be more affordable and more or less efficient. So lots of considerations for us to think about as we plan for growth and as we make these choices about where to focus the residential and employment growth of the community. Okay, so just before I describe the three scenarios that we've developed, each of the maps I'm going to show you has a number of different layers on it. And not expecting you to remember all of these, but just to introduce the legend for the maps, so that when you're seeing these different colors on the maps, you have a sense of what you're looking at. So we have a boundary for the district, which is a red dashed line. The current 2011 OCP urban containment boundary that I just showed you on the previous map, that's a thick black line on all of the maps, and that stays the same. It stays consistent between the three scenarios, so you can see the difference in how growth is being placed within that urban containment boundary. We have what we're calling low growth and high growth. So you'll see yellow and orange areas on the maps, and low growth basically means that there is very little change from the existing condition, or modest, let's call it modest change from the existing condition. So if there is an existing single family neighborhood, you might see some subdivision of individual lots. You might see some low density infill within that area, but it's not expected to significantly change from what it is now. The orange areas are the areas where we're expecting to see higher growth and a larger amount of change over the next 20 years. So that's what those two colors mean. You'll see a cross-hatched area, and that's an area that is essentially already approved development. So it's kind of, the decision has been made on that development, even though it has not been built at this stage. We're also showing in red neighborhood nodes. So these are the small commercial areas within some of the communities. And there's also a designation called the mixed use commercial core. So this is where residential and commercial fairly high density development exists within the core of some of the communities. We're also showing various different green level layers, so you can see how the growth patterns relate to the larger areas of protected or resource lands. So the municipal forest reserve in dark green, sensitive ecosystem inventory lands in light green, and the agricultural land reserve in the tan color. We're also showing the industrial land in purple. And then the white or blank areas that you'll see are basically the remaining rural and forested lands outside of the urban containment boundary. You'll see lots of little black dots and rectangles on the map, and this represents the existing building. So we wanted to give people a sense of, you know, what is the existing pattern of development. So when you're looking at these scenarios, you can see how they relate to the existing buildings that exist within the community. H is for the new hospital going in Belmachin, and then we have roads shown as gray arrows, and the blue are streams and water bodies. So that's a lot of information, I realize, but you'll see, and I'll try to go over that again as we see the individual scenarios unfold. So let's go to scenario 1. So this is what we're calling business as usual, or a dispersed growth scenario. So this is basically a scenario for future growth that is based on the current OCP and the patterns that you've seen in the community in the past. So just to orient you again with the map, so you can see we've tilted this map to give you a sense of the topography of the community, where there's high and low points. And you can see the municipal forest areas there in dark green, and other sensitive ecosystem areas in light green, and the agricultural land in the tan color. And then you can hopefully see the urban containment boundary, the thicker black line around the communities, the labeled communities. So you can see the line around Chemainus, a line around Crofton, around the South End and Cowichan and University Village area, Berkey's Corner, and around Belmachin. So that's the urban containment boundary from the current OCP that I mentioned earlier. You can see where the new proposed hospital is located in Belmachin there. And hopefully you can see these little black rectangles and shapes which represent the existing buildings. And you can see them best just south within Duncan, in the area that's called University Village there. So that's the community of Duncan, and because it hasn't got any color on top of it, you can see those existing buildings. But they basically are concentrated, again, within the urban containment boundary with some lower density existing buildings throughout the rest of the community. You can hopefully, by Maple Bay, see that hatched area, and that is the Kingsview area, which is the approved area of development. And that's the same for all of the scenarios. So, so for this scenario, the key things to notice are that growth, whether it's low growth or higher levels of growth, basically fills up the urban containment boundary. So growth really can go almost anywhere within the urban containment boundary within this scenario. We're seeing the highest levels of growth within Belmachin, representing the Belmachin local area plan and around the hospital. So there's high amounts of change and growth there. High areas of growth around University Village. A little bit in the node, the commercial node in Berkey's Corner. You're seeing quite considerable growth in Crofton, and also within the mixed use commercial core in Chemainus. So those are the areas of kind of the highest growth But again, in this scenario, we call it dispersed growth because basically there is some growth within all of the urban containment boundary in all of the communities. The other thing just to note here is the purple area, which is the existing industrial areas. And these actually are consistent between all three scenarios. So what does this one mean for the future of North Cowichan? So what it means is there may be some development on rural and natural lands that are currently within the urban containment boundary but haven't been developed to this point. So we will see some impact and loss of some of those rural and natural lands to development in this scenario. Growth is more dispersed than others, so it's probably at a lower density. Again, kind of following the patterns of the past, current and past, where it's predominantly single-family development, single detached housing. This dispersed pattern likely means more people will be reliant on personal vehicles, and the majority of new housing units are likely to be single detached, which of course tend to be less affordable and use more resources than attached multi-unit dwellings. And in this scenario, there's a new community that would be created in the Bell-McKinnon area, and this will be guided by the Bell-McKinnon local area plan. And sorry, I'm just moving things around there so I can see my own screen. Okay, so now we are looking at scenario 2. So scenario 2 we've called focus growth, because in this scenario, really the majority of growth is focused in the south end communities of Berkey's Corner, University Village, and some around the Cowichan area, and then up in the Chemainus community with only a limited amount in the Crofton area. So so really the overall pattern of growth is focused within a much smaller area of the urban containment boundary. So you can see various areas that are white within the urban containment boundary. So if you look at Chemainus and you look at Crofton, you can see there are patches that are white, as well as patches around Cowichan that are white. And this means that basically those are seeing no growth in the future. There is also no growth within the Bell-McKinnon area within this, although the hospital itself, of course, would be going ahead. We're seeing the highest growth, the most amount of change focused in the Berkey's Corner node, around the commercial node in Berkey's Corner. So there's quite a large orange area that you're seeing there. Also around and adjacent to the regional shopping center on Highway 1 at Drinkwater. And within the core area, a small core mixed use area within Crofton, and the core a nodal area of Chemainus. So very much a more focused, directed form of growth in this scenario. And so what does this one mean for the future of North Cowichan? Well, it means protection of rural and natural lands from development. So those lands within the UCB that aren't developed are likely protected and can remain as natural or rural lands that are within the UCB. There is a higher density of development in the core of the existing communities, potentially leading to some greater vibrancy within those communities. Less dispersed development, of course, means people are less reliant on personal cars for transportation. So they do have some opportunity to walk, cycle, or roll, or maybe take transit to some of their needs. And, you know, recognizing that a lot of people do have to travel outside of the community as well. Housing units are more likely to be attached in this scenario. So we're talking multi-unit housing, duplexes, townhouses, and apartments, although there would still be some single-family housing as well. And while the Bell-McKinnon area doesn't see much growth, the Bell-McKinnon hospital site will proceed as planned. So that's focused growth, very different from the first one, which we called dispersed growth. I'll take you to the third and final scenario. So this one we're calling multi-center growth. So you can see in this scenario, it's a bit more of a middle ground. There is quite a lot of the urban containment boundary is seeing some form of growth, and yet there are kind of multiple centers of growth here. So we're seeing high growth in the South Bell-McKinnon area, not in the north part of it, around the regional shopping center, quite considerable growth around the Berkey's Corner node, also in University Village, a little node and some high density development around the Kingsview and Cowichan Lake area. In this scenario, we actually see a little bit of growth in the Maple Bay area, so around the small node there down by the water. So it's pretty modest, but allowing for some growth within that area. And then some modest growth in all of Crofton with some focused higher density growth around the commercial mixed use area. And in Chemainus, fairly high level of growth within both within both of the node areas within Chemainus. So you can see that this scenario is really focused on the idea of creating small commercial nodes and building high density development and change around those nodes within each community. So what does this one mean for the future of North Cowichan? So growth is focused in a smaller area than the current UCB. So it is more compact than the business as usual scenario, not quite as compact as the focused growth scenario. There is increased density in various neighborhood nodes, and this would see things like duplexes, triplexes, and townhomes built around these nodes to support the viability of those commercial nodes. We'll probably be looking at some increased viability, as I mentioned, with local commercial opportunities. Access to shops and services in these neighborhoods means that people are probably a little less reliant on their cars, more likely to walk and cycle. There would be a new neighborhood formed in the Bell-McKinnon core village area, but it would not take up the whole of that Bell-McKinnon urban containment boundary area. And we're seeing some modest development in Maple Bay that might mean some more viable local businesses, might provide some additional housing diversity and choice for people in Maple Bay. But we do want to caution that this may not be financially viable because Maple Bay is not currently connected to the municipal sewer service. And so there would have to be some kind of alternative servicing system that was developed if that little node within Maple Bay was to go ahead at a higher density. So those are the three scenarios. So just to remind you, we've got scenario one, which is business as usual or dispersed growth. Scenario two, which is focused growth. And scenario three, which is called multi-center growth. So in a minute, we're going to invite your questions. Before we do that, I'm just going to quickly outline the next steps so you can understand the next steps in the process. So we have an online survey that really is where we are hoping you will provide your comments and opinions on these three scenarios. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you like and what you don't like about each of the scenarios. And so that will be open until June the 6th. We will then analyze that engagement in the rest of the month of June and produce a report. And then we'll share the results and the preferred scenario with the OCP Advisory Committee and Council later in the summer. And then finally, upload the results of all the engagement and the preferred scenario to the website so everyone can see it. So that is our process. And then that will lead to essentially drafting of the whole OCP document later in the fall. Okay, so we have got to the end of the presentation. Thanks for bearing with us, folks. And so now we've got an opportunity for you to weigh in with questions or comments. And for this, we are using the Q&A function within the webinar. So down at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A button. And if you click that, you'll be able to type in your questions, and you will also be able to vote on the questions. So you can click the little thumbs up in order to vote on a question. So if you really like someone's question and you want to see it rise to the top of the list, you can vote on it. So we would ask you to keep your questions short, or questions or comments short and concise as much as possible, because we are expecting quite a number. We're trying to get through them. Please be respectful of with your comments and be respectful of other people's opinions as you make them. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully you can see us all again.
Rob, I've been answering some technical questions, but I think we've certainly been getting into some of the content. So just to clarify, yeah, invite people to send in their questions.
Yeah, so so just to clarify how you do this, so down at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see something called Q&A, a little button. And if you click that button, it should bring up a Q&A panel, and you are able to type in your questions into that panel. So I see a number of questions that they're up here already. So first one from Patricia. I would like to know why people are asked to choose a growth scenario when the final scenario will be a combination of features. It strikes me then that the comments as to why the scenario is chosen are more important to the exercise than the actual choice of growth scenario. What if people don't answer those important questions as to why they picked it? So you are picking up on a key thing here, Patricia, that we do need people to tell us why they like one scenario over another. Or more importantly, what features of each scenario they like and which ones they don't like. So we can then sift through that and kind of understand where there is support for different aspects of the scenario. So it's not like we want people to say, oh, 1, 2, or 3, and that's the end of the story. It's very much what do you like and not like about each one of the scenarios. And as you say, we expect to really develop a hybrid scenario from the comments that we receive. So thanks for that. David Weeb, hello, any plans for more bike lanes? Might throw that one over to Chris or Rob, who have been working on an active transportation plan to answer that.
I'd be happy to answer that question. So concurrent with the OCP update project, North Cowichan is doing a master transportation plan that will look at conventional transportation, the roads for vehicle movements, but also bike lanes and pedestrian routes and other forms of transportation as well. So that's happening concurrently with the OCP review, and we expect that the information from the master transportation plan process will be built into the OCP, so that those two plans will be complementary.
Great, thanks, Rob. So someone's asked, is this webinar with 50 people the extent of how scenarios are going to be selected? No, absolutely not. This webinar is really just a chance for people to understand the background to the scenarios and the scenarios themselves. The input and the feedback is actually through the survey that we would like you to complete. So really, this is just an introduction so that we can help people understand the scenarios. The actual feedback is through the survey process, and we'll share the link at the end with you as to where to find the survey. Now, Chris, maybe you've already been talking to Rhiannon about this, but she has said, what is a build-out scenario? Also, which document takes precedence over the other, LAP or OCP? So a build-out scenario is really anticipating where you have a land use within an OCP, and it's anticipating what that looks like when it has been fully built out, or the land has been fully developed. So that's a build-out scenario. Which document takes precedence over the other, LAP or OCP? Rob, you might want to take that one on. Is that okay?
I can respond to that.
Okay,
it's the OCP. The local area plan, all of our local area plans have been built as we're legislatively required. All of our plans, policies, bylaws, and works need to be compliant with consistent with the OCP. So while not explicit, the local area plans typically add a lot more texture to a community in terms of the broad policies and goals set out in an official community plan. So the OCP certainly our 2011 OCP has guided the creation of 3 local area plans now, and we'll expect we'll be working on how do we conform these local area plans to the final land use and growth scenario, and as well as future local area planning. That's really I would underline, that's really when we go back to why we started this OCP review in the first place. That was the goal, was to better support individual communities in the local area planning that supports, that manages the growth and ongoing existence of these communities in terms of providing good service.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Peter has asked, was there any consideration of a municipal electric utility operated by renewable energy? And there has not been within the OCP process, but I'm wondering if either Chris or Rob could respond. Has that been something that's come up in the CAPE work or any of the other economic development work that you've done in the district?
Just district energy is something that certainly has come up in the climate action and energy plan and other environmental planning that's been done in the Cowichan Valley. And so it's perhaps not exactly what the writer is asking, but the concept of district energy is something that our council is supportive of, and we haven't found an opportunity where that could actually occur yet, but we are looking for potential projects where that might be a possibility.
Okay, thanks Rob. Chris has asked, what scenario provides the most opportunity for diversified economic development? So as we explained, each scenario essentially has the same industrial land use, and those are existing industrial lands essentially, and those lands are anticipated to accommodate the employment growth of the community for some time to come. So really, each of the scenarios in terms of industrial development is very similar. I think the third scenario, the multi-center growth, does place this focus on smaller commercial nodes and building some denser housing around those nodes. So it is likely to result, if we in greater support for kind of local commercial uses and local commercial employment uses. So I think there is a bit of an advantage there. All of the scenarios, really protect most of all of the farmland, certainly, and most of the rural lands. So in terms of local food security, they're very much similar as well. So a lot of the difference in terms of economic development and approach is going to come out in policy work that we do as the next stage of work on the OCP. And that's where we can really dig into economic development policies that support the local economy and local employment. Rob Fullerton, how many people are expected to live in the Kingsway development? Is it the highest growth area over the next 20 years? Will it have the highest population density in North Cowichan? Chris, Rob? How many people?
I can answer that one. The overall Kingsview development is approved for 1,200 units. About 100 of those units, I think, are all simultaneously under construction right now. It seems like if you drive up Highwood right now, there's a lot of construction activity going on there. But one phase of it has been approved now, so that draws down from that 1,200 number. I mean, you can take that from the sort of somewhere in the ballpark of 3,700 to 3,800 people anticipated by 2050, according to the population projection report that we're relying on. It makes up a large part of that. I wouldn't say it's the highest growth area necessarily. That's kind of what we're here to talk about tonight. In terms of population density, it depends on how you define it, but it's a single family neighborhood, typically. Just doing quick math in my head here, somewhere in the range of like 8 to 9 units per acre net, so not including roads and other public lands. So it's by no means a very high density residential neighborhood in comparison to things like a townhouse or apartment buildings, depending on neighborhood design.
Great, thanks, Chris. Okay, sorry, I just lost my list here. Has an analysis been done on each scenario's impact on congestion? You mentioned potential reduction in car use, but has that been translated into car movements? And no, that work has not been done at this point. So we're at a higher level here. And that specific analysis has not been done. Okay. Nancy, how do scenarios 2 and 3 differ for Cowichan, for the Cowichan Lake area? So let me answer that one. Just give me a second here. They are very similar, except for the multi-center growth scenario anticipates a little bit more a higher density development around the node, the commercial node. And Rob or Chris, can you remind me of the name of that little area, that node? Does that have a name?
Yes, yeah, Kingsview. It's at the base of Kingsview Road.
Right.
I think it's the best way to refer to it.
So the idea is there that to try and support that node and get it to develop, there would be some additional housing density in the form of multifamily housing around that node. So that's the main difference between 2 and 3 for the Cowichan Lake area.
Rob, I would also add that there's a fair amount around the vacant lands between Indian Road and Maple Bay, as well as some other things on Lower Maple Bay Road that have been shown conceptually in the focused growth scenario to be removed. So it really focuses on taking some development lands out of contention in terms of versus the multi-center growth, which is a little bit more relaxed in that way.
Okay. Comment from, sorry, these things just seem to be jumping around here. Margot, Rob, a very important consideration is people have moved to the Cowichan Valley for a rural environment. They're very happy with the status quo. We moved here for semi-rural, and many people sitting back, not engaging in this OCP and not vocalizing their thoughts as they're happy with the status quo. And thank you, Margot, for the comment. I mean, all three scenarios, as I mentioned, are protecting and not changing the lands outside of the urban containment boundary. So if you live in a rural part of the community, essentially these three scenarios are going to be the same, with very little change in that rural part of the community. Chris, which scenario would require the most subsidy in terms of infrastructure and amenity development from the municipal government? Mostly, Chris, infrastructure, and Rob, maybe you can correct me, but most infrastructure is paid for through development. So development kind of pays for the infrastructure associated with growth, maybe not 100% of it. And because most of the growth, the great majority, is focused within the existing urban containment boundary that mainly has sewers, it's not that there's not a lot of subsidy required in my view for these scenarios. But if these scenarios anticipated growth kind of spreading into new greenfield areas, or more greenfield areas, then you'd probably be seeing a lot more costs for infrastructure, and some of that may or may not be subsidized. But I think in this case, all of them are relatively compact. However, I think the more compact scenarios, such as focused growth and multi-center growth, are going to require less infrastructure. They are going to make more use of existing infrastructure. So in terms of overall infrastructure costs, and if there were subsidies, those two would be the preferred direction, I think. Rob, any follow-up to that?
I think that's generally true, Mr. Bars. But the one in the longer term, I think that there are some ongoing maintenance or higher maintenance costs with a more distributed version as well. All scenarios, those costs of development, the initial costs, can be put on the developers through development cost charges and other ways of recouping costs that the municipality would incur with development. But in the longer term, a more distributed form of growth does have additional costs for maintaining the infrastructure and replacing it.
Right. Thanks, Rob. Okay, Steve has a comment, really. I believe the status quo is not acceptable to residents of the Cowichan area, scenario number 1. The multi-center growth seems to be an enhanced version of our current plan. In my mind, number 2 scenario, focused growth, is more likely to maintain some of our rural lands, minimize use of cars, and densify housing within the UCB, which has better environmental, transportation, and preservation of rural areas. That's my pick. Thanks for that comment, Steve.
Rob, if I could just add to that comment, very much appreciated, and certainly encourage anybody. It's really, really important to go to www.northcowichan.ca/OCP and be sure to do the survey and provide that input so that we can take it all in one go.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, comment from Bruce. Housing units always seem to be one of the 3 options: apartment, townhouse, or single family dwellings. I'm 64, and in 5 to 10 years, I don't want to live in any of these. How have you included the option for mixing demographics in planned communities and rural areas that can feed, educate, babysit, entertain themselves, and share resources located in rural areas on, say, 5 to 10 acre lots? Okay, I guess I would respond to that by saying, there are those options within North Cowichan right now. There are those larger lots, and as I mentioned, there may be some modest subdivision that happens within the rural area. So some of those larger lots might be subdivided into slightly smaller lots. But it's not going to represent kind of the majority of growth by any means. But it is an option, and we recognize that people love the rural character and lifestyle that North Cowichan provides. So that is not going away. It is in high demand. I think we recognize that as well. And so, yeah, some modest change in that area is likely to happen just based on the existing zoning that already exists. But thanks for that comment, Bruce. It's good to attune us to the needs of people as they age in the community and want to stay in the community. Okay, what is the tipping point in terms of residential growth numbers to support the development of commercial space at Kingsview and Donnet Drive? If unknown, is there the possibility of an urban land economist being retained to determine if the build out of the commercial node is even viable? Cowichan has approval for 1,700 new homes. So Rob, Chris, this has been, this has been planned for a while, this node. It struggled to get off the ground. Has there to this point been any analysis that says kind of when the tipping point might say it's now viable as homes get built up in the Kingsview area?
Over the years, there has been periodic interest from commercial businesses in locating there, and unfortunately, that hasn't happened. The tipping point is really a business decision to be made by a developer and the tenants that would occupy it. Based on some market analysis that has been done with previous proposals, we feel that the tipping point is fairly close. I think one of the things that has been holding back the commercial site from developing is that many of the residents in Maple Bay do regularly commute into Duncan on a daily basis where they can get those commercial services. So the market area or the number of residents needed to support a commercial center at that location is a little bit higher than it would be elsewhere. But there are, with Kingsview, quite a number of homes still to come, and indications are that the market conditions will be positive, hopefully in the near future, to allow that to happen.
Rob? We have a comment from Alan, who is a cartographer. Speaking as a cartographer, for better informed public engagement, I suggest more legible maps that are oriented to the north and able to be viewed side by side for comparison. Enlargement of the 3 UCB areas is important, as they would enable people to see how each one is affected or changed, I guess, by each scenario. Thanks for the comment there, Alan. We kind of played around with both regular plan view north-south maps and these tilted slightly 3D maps. Ultimately ended up with this kind of map just because we wanted to show topography and show the topography a little bit more clearly, but your point is well taken. Thank you. How much land would be included in that high density Kingsview node in Cowichan in scenario 3? What are the boundaries of this development should it occur? Patricia, this is kind of a high level exercise right now. As you're seeing, we're really showing polygons and blobs intentionally, because we don't want to get into the exact details of parcel by parcel analysis at this point, and that would actually take just way too much work at this point to do that for the whole community. But as you can see, it's a fairly modest area around that Kingsview node. Okay. Karen, you didn't mention existing and potential residential capacity in North Cowichan. Don't we already have sufficient capacity to meet growth projections? And this is something that we did quite a lot of work on over the course of developing these scenarios, where, yes, in some senses, there is a lot of existing capacity if you look at all the existing local area plans. However, there is some opportunity to change some of those plans, and there is the opportunity in some cases where phase development agreements are expiring, for instance, very soon. So yes, there is a fair bit of capacity, but that capacity is not always locked in for the long-term 20-year future. And so we do think there is some capacity to move around that density and the focus of that growth during this period.
Rob, could I add something there? I think one of the things to really, when we're talking about growth management, North Cowichan is not a physically small community, as we've talked about a number of times tonight. So the reality is that there's capacity for days, but it's the question of there's actually not as much growth as there is capacity. So where should this land, where should this development go? And that's where we hear comments about option 2, which is a constrained, is a more focused growth approach. In fact, business as usual is the most relaxed version of growth scenario that we presented. The other two are actually constrictions on that over and above that scenario. So the question is not one of capacity, but one of what is appropriate and what is desired by the residents of North Cowichan. So we also have to balance that with things like infrastructure, as we've talked about as well. So, but this isn't, oh my goodness, we don't have any space. This is, oh my goodness, what space do we want to use?
Chris? Okay, Margot, Rob, I think you're a bit misleading here to the public. You mentioned development and you mentioned only the fact there are negative impacts on the community. That is a bit misleading. Development is also positive. Development can have positive impacts as well as including stormwater management and getting homes connected to sewer instead of septic. Your biases should be watched in this presentation. Margot, thank you for pointing that out. I did try to indicate that development and growth can have both positive and negative impacts, and that's why we manage growth for those positive benefits, as well as managing and mitigating the negative benefits. So I think that's what I said as part of this. But your point is well taken. There are both positive and negative impacts of growth and development, absolutely, and that's why this OCP and growth management, land use planning is such an important part of the OCP. So how we shape that, really determines the outcomes. And so we're trying to shape that growth in a way that has the maximum positive benefit for the entire community. But thanks for pointing it out. And absolutely, growth and development can have very, very positive impacts as well. Barb, I feel that including commercial space within each community will reduce road traffic and encourage community identity. Which of your plans do you feel encourages this the most? In which communities and how so? So Barb, that's a good point. Really, scenario 3, the multi-center growth, is the one that is most focused on those smaller commercial nodes within each community. So that would be the one that encourages that the most. And if we look at scenario 3, it has centers within, certainly within Chemainus, building on kind of the existing centers in Chemainus, building kind of residential change and growth around the Crofton mixed use area. It's got the kind of the stronger node within the Cowichan area, building some additional density around the Maple Bay Center as well as Bell McKinnon and the Berkey's Corner nodes. So really that scenario is called multi-center growth because the idea each community has a small commercial center surrounded by some higher density is the idea there. David, are there discussions about laneway homes or other alternatives regarding affordable housing while still promoting community agriculture? Yeah, I mean, definitely different forms of housing there's been a lot of interest, I think, in different forms of housing, not really specifically laneway homes so much. And there aren't a ton of lanes in North Cowichan, although there are some. But certainly all different and diverse forms of multifamily housing have been mentioned through the process so far, and we can anticipate that there will be some policy support for different forms of housing for sure. Peter, was there any consideration for changing the criteria for home taxing, most notably basing it more on carbon emissions as well as an assessment value? Interesting idea. Mainly, I mean, those taxation classification systems are set by the province, and it's very hard to kind of for a municipality to change the way that assessment is done. I think there is some flexibility, but I think it would be very difficult for a municipality to base any kind of taxation on emissions, unfortunately. Or fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, I guess. But it's an interesting idea. I mean, certainly I think, Peter, the idea of, you know, aligning the financial incentives and things like development fees with the type of growth you want to see is a worthwhile thing to look at. Joyce, growth management planning, i.e. sewage treatment, are adequate. Is sewage treatment adequate for proposed growth? When will North Cowichan municipality take a serious look at on-land sewage treatment systems per area as opposed to the sewage lagoons on the designated heritage Cowichan River, with an existing outfall to Cowichan Bay to be extended to the satellite channel? There was an agreement signed. So I guess different kinds of sewage treatment systems. Rob, is the municipality looking at kind of alternative approaches to how it does sewage treatment? Is it currently you know, kind of locked into the current approach? Tell us about sewage treatment and any notions for the future.
So right now the municipality has kind of three and I guess a small fourth sewage treatment system. One in Chemainus, Crofton, and in the south end, the Joint Utility Board system services the south end, and it's currently it discharges treated effluent into the Cowichan River. There is work happening to look at an alternative to that, where there would be an outfall that would remove the effluent from the river, which is something the Cowichan Tribes is supportive of. So that work is active and underway, and we expect that will happen. There is additional capacity within that system right now to accommodate future development, and with some additional expansion of that facility, that there would be growth potential into the foreseeable future that could use that system. So the municipality isn't at this time looking at additional systems. That the plan would be to continue to use the JUB system, but with an alternative for the effluent discharge.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Okay, so from Cam, with homeowners moving away from multi-unit developments in favor of single-family dwellings, are we moving in the wrong direction with scenarios 2 and 3? It's predicted that this trend will continue post-pandemic. Okay, I think Cam is talking about the fact that, yeah, people are moving away from denser cities to places like North Cowichan during the COVID period, because now people can work from home, you know, do telecommuting. So there is strong market demand for single-family dwellings, and I think, you know, those also come with some impact in terms of the amount of land that is taken up and some of the other impacts that we talked about. So I think, you know, there are pros and cons, Cam, and I think that's what these scenarios are trying to look at, is say, you know, with some of them, yes, they're more, scenario 1 is definitely more focused on single family dwellings, dispersed growth, some lower density. The other 2 scenarios are a bit more focused and therefore would see additional types of multi-unit dwellings. That doesn't mean it's going to be all multifamily, all apartments by any means. So it would still be single family units as well, but the proportions would change. Karen, have you done any analysis of how increasing or reducing growth in one area will encourage or discourage growth in another? And Chris had a question related to that about, in scenario 2, growth has been removed from Crofton, Belmackinnon, and Chemainus, but I don't see offsetting areas, increases in Berkeys or University Village. Why wouldn't Crofton and Chemainus and Berkeys be high growth areas under scenario 2? And I just want to look at So his question, why wouldn't, sorry, the questions keep jumping around for me because people are upvoting them, I think. Right, so why wouldn't Crofton and Chemainus and Berkey's be high growth areas under scenario 2? And the reason for that is because it's a more focused growth, and so the change that we're likely to see in that focused growth scenario is higher density, and so you're compressing the number of units into a smaller area in those in that scenario number 2. So yeah, so there are definitely implications. You know, you move growth from one area or focus it in one area, and yes, it has implications in some of the other areas. There has been some talk about North Cowichan becoming like Langford. Which of the scenarios would best describe the development in Langford? I'm not sure I can really answer that. I don't think any of them are like Langford because there's such a large area of protected land in North Cowichan. So Langford has a much greater area of suburban development than I think we see in North Cowichan. So I don't think any of them are like Langford, Steve. Joyce. Oh, sorry. I think we've answered that question. David, as I understand it, the urban containment boundary is apparently unchanged for many years and will continue to be so. Can you tell us why or how the plethora of development beyond that boundary has occurred in the Cowichan Lake area? Well, Rob, could you respond to that? Is there a considerable amount of development outside of the urban containment boundary in the Cowichan Lake area, or is most of it within the urban containment boundary?
So currently North Cowichan's zoning bylaw is out of date, and it doesn't even align well with the current OCP. So there is a fair bit of development that happens under existing zoning outside of the urban containment boundary. It tends to be medium to larger sized subdivisions, typically from 1 or 2 lot subdivisions up to maybe 15 or 20 lots sometimes. So that is occurring now to some degree because of the zoning bylaw. Once the official community plan has been updated, the next project will be to come in with a new zoning bylaw that would implement the official community plan and likely result in changes to zoning outside of the designated areas for development, which would address that issue to some degree anyways.
Yes. So we are at the time that we said we would end the webinar, but we still have a lot of questions here. So I'm going to propose that we carry on. Of course, people are not obliged to stay by any means, and you will be able to view the webinar recording later if you choose to. But I think in the interest of getting through some additional questions, we should stay on for another 20 minutes or so. Is that okay with the rest of the panel? Thumbs up.
Sounds
okay.
good with me. Before everybody goes, I guess I would, if people are going to start leaving though, just certainly, absolutely want to remind you and remind you to remind your friends and your neighbors in North Cowichan. Please go to www.northcowichan.ca/OCP to find out more about this project and to participate in the survey. The survey closes on June 6th, so be sure to get your answers in before then. There will also be a tax notice with your property taxes. You'll get a reminder as well. There'll be a piece of paper that reminding people to do the survey. So please be sure to do the survey.
Great, Mackenzie. Maybe I think you're able to send a message to all the participants. If you could put that that website into the chat message so everyone could see it. And Rob, again, the website is, please.
www.northcowichan.ca/OCP.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. and Mackenzie's put the survey form in there as well, I see. Okay. Okay, so let's carry on. David, the most surprising info tonight is the very low growth projections compared to other areas on Vancouver Island. Why is that? Susie, is that something you know the Rennie report pretty well? Any reflections on kind of the comparative levels of growth for North Cowichan compared with other areas within the CVRD?
I don't have a lot to comment on that. Maybe Rob can.
Yeah, so the Rennie report is available. I think if if a person just Googled the Rennie report, it'll come up, and a person could see the numbers for themselves. Those projections look out over a number of years, and as our population is aging, the general trend is downwards, and so we are going through a growth spurt right now in this community and elsewhere in British Columbia, but in the longer term trend will be downwards. And so if we're looking out 20 years, that is sort of why we're not projecting that we'll continue to grow at the pace that we're growing now. It's also important to keep in mind that the Cowichan Valley has gone through spells like this in the past where there's rapid growth and then it declines. So it is fairly typical for our region to see ups and downs in growth rates, but the trend is typically around 1%, which is what the Rennie report projects as well.
Follow-up question on growth projections. Does the prediction for an increase in population include or identify the number of children? Demographics will shape certain needs for housing and services, childcare, elder care, etc. Growth needs to be about services too. Are services that will be needed part of what is being considered? Susie, is that one?
Yeah, all that information is in the Rennie report. I think Chris put it in the chat. And also, if you go to the backgrounder report that we wrote to accompany the survey, it's got further information in there as well. And as Rob mentioned earlier, as we move through the other OCP policy chapter updates, we'll be digging into that sort of thing about services for children and families and elder care. So that's a good point. Thanks for that, Wendy.
Rob says, following up on the Kingsview question, 3,800 people equals all of Chemainus and half of Crofton. If we are only expecting 500 new citizens by 2050, it means that 1 of 3 new residents are going to live in this one neighborhood. Should it be a node in all 3 scenarios? And I think it is. I mean, the commercial area, that little node, will be a node in all 3 scenarios. I think what we've showed though is in some of the scenarios there is less development in the Cowichan Lake area. So yes, the already approved development is there, but there are other lands that may or may not develop going forward. But point taken, I think that there is a lot of growth projected for that area. Margot, moving into higher density can reduce the ability for each home to have their own vegetable garden or to have a hobby farm and produce their own food. Simply an observation. And yeah, I mean, I think Margot, right now there are a lot of larger lots and hobby farms and rural lots in North Cowichan, and I think under all 3 scenarios, most of those continue to be. But there is also, the other side of the coin, which is there is little choice in terms of the type and diversity of housing, and the affordability is a challenge for some people. So it's just trying to find that balance of having lot types and sizes for a variety of different lifestyles. Okay, we answered that one. Rhiannon's. Will all UCB remain unchanged, or are there scenarios where they could be altered? Okay, this is from Deb. Good point, Deb. So we showed the UCB as a continuous line on all three scenarios because we wanted to use it as the kind of reference point, so you could see how growth was being reshaped. That doesn't mean, though, that the UCB itself couldn't be changed in the new OCP. So based on this scenarios discussion and the eventual land use plan, we will be considering whether the UCB needs to be tightened up at all. So it's not fixed. It's not fixed as it is right now.
Rob, can I clarify one other thing? I think one of the things that one of the big differences that this OCP proposes is that it proposes to actually comment more on what happens inside of the urban containment boundary in terms of land use designations, which our OCP does not do a lot of right now. And most other communities you look at would have designations for commercial and industrial, as well as high, medium, and low density residential. So you could foresee, and this is sort of preempting a question, I think, from Chris Crowther as well about this, what would happen to the white areas that are within the existing UCB. Those may become, for example, areas in Crofton, if we were to go with scenario 2, a large amount of the existing single family neighborhoods in Crofton would simply be designated single family because that's what it is right now, which would effectively, disclude it from that future densification. So it's a way of preserving those residential neighborhoods, what they are, and sort of targeting infill to specific areas that might be based on an asset management rationale in terms of improving the infrastructure specifically in a more specific area of that community in order to better manage that cost going forward. So that's what a scenario 2 would probably look like in reality.
Okay, thank you. Chris had a follow-up question to his, or follow-up comment, no, a question to his previous question about infrastructure and costs. If that's true, then why do our taxes go up every year? And I guess, Chris, there's lots of answers to the question of taxes. Taxes pay for many, many different things. Okay, we've answered that one. What scenario sends the loudest signal to global investors that North Cowichan is open for business? Let's think about that one. If people in Crofton prefer a particular scenario that could affect, say, the Bell McKinnon area, it would seem that each area should be a focus scenario relative to that area. I think we take your point, Joyce, but we're trying to think of the community as a whole here. We're trying to consider North Cowichan as a whole place and think about all of the places at the same time. So people, of course, will be looking at their own area, but we want them to consider the whole community and the pattern of growth and development across the whole community.
We are asking both questions, though, Rob. Sorry to interrupt again. We are asking both questions. We do ask in the survey, when you think about North Cowichan as a whole, which scenario do you prefer? And then we actually ask you which community do you live in, much like we did at the beginning of this webinar, and then ask you which scenario you prefer for your community. So it's unless you're gaming the survey, it's not likely that this scenario that Joyce presents would play out. So, but residents do have an opportunity to say what they think in their own community. That may be different. You may prefer a different scenario for your own community than for the overall. That's why we asked both those questions.
Thanks, Chris. Rhiannon again, I don't think you can guarantee less road traffic if you cannot guarantee commercial diversity. I mean, every neighborhood would need its own butcher, baker, candlestick maker, accountant, lawyer, doctor, etc. Are these nodes big enough to support commercial diversity? Are there incentives to create business? So each little bit of commercial diversity helps. And I don't think anyone is pretending that most people will use walking or cycling for all of their trips. But as commercial diversity increases, people do have more and more choice. And so you see this kind of incremental change going on. So yes, I mean, ideally you would have these nodes that have a great deal of diversity and people could meet most of their daily needs. But that's going to take time, and in some cases, just won't be the reality. And so, but I think each additional use or service or amenity means that some people are going to make some trips by foot or using a bike or other forms of rolling. The only item which is declared emergency is climate change. I do not see your OCP reflecting this reality. This is from Peter, and Peter, we haven't, we're not yet drafting the OCP. So this is just one aspect of a whole OCP, right? There are a number of different topics, and climate change will be a theme and a lens that's woven throughout the whole document. It is one of the key goals, and I think it's also reflected in some of the principles. And then in terms of this work, I think, the more focused scenarios are probably going to result in less emissions, albeit slightly less emissions than the more dispersed scenario. There's a lot more to do in terms of climate change, though, than land use planning. Like, we have to think about buildings, have to think about electrification of vehicles, have to think about waste management, industrial emissions. There's a lot there, and growth management can't solve all of those issues.
And Rob, I was going to add that the full text under the climate change principle does talk about responding to the climate emergency, so that is in there for sure.
Thank you. Considering that the Kingsview development node will service the properties, Trumpeter Point, etc., what types of services could be expected? Has there been any discussion, Rob or Chris, about the type of uses within that node, or is it very much open to kind of what a developer or commercial developer might think is viable?
Mm-hmm. The type of uses that are permitted there now are local commercial type uses. So they would be things like a grocery store, a coffee shop. I don't believe a gas station or that type of thing is permitted. It's small retail businesses, that type of thing. So that's what's permitted. What actually goes there will depend on sort of the economics of it for the business itself. Mm-hmm.
Barb says, I have to say that I completely disagree with the assessment of the need of the commercial space at Kingsview and Donnet Drive. I believe that creating a commercial space in this location would significantly reduce the need for residents to travel into town and support the commercial space. So I think Barb's saying that if you had a commercial node there, then residents wouldn't be supporting the other commercial areas, other existing commercial areas. Bruce, when I get old, I'm going to live at Sangoma, an illegal, low-cost housing unplanned community. I don't want to live in an apartment townhouse or single-family detached housing development, and that's all you are considering. I think I heard Marsh say 8 to 80. Most small new families can't afford to live in these developments. I want to know and support my neighbors and their children. How can you say there is little choice in the types and diversity of housing? That line killed my interest in this process. Okay. So I think Bruce is taking issue with me saying that there's little choice in the type and diversity of housing currently within North Cowichan. Steve Jones, are you wanting to hear our preferences re-scenarios? Really, Steve, we're looking ideally for your preferences through the survey vehicle. So we've provided the link there. So this is really for questions and comments right now. How does the population of Berkey's Corner compare to the greater Kingsview population now and 15 to 20 years out? Is that one for Chris?
Yeah, sure. Probably about 0.75 to 1. So Berkey's Corner is about, as an area, the community we've identified is actually roughly just shy of 10,000 residents. It's also contiguous to a lot of other very urbanized areas, mostly the city of Duncan. So it's in a fairly urban fabric, dense urban fabric, whereas Kingsview and more broadly, Cowichan, I think is, don't quote me on this, but I think it's somewhere around about 7,500 to 8,000 residents. So that's the sort of the Queen of Angels and up to Maple Bay area. So it's a smaller population and a slightly smaller population and a bit more remote, I guess is probably the best comparison. And I can't remember if there was a follow-up question to that.
Nope, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Another one for Chris. What happens to the existing LAP when the OCP is changed, or to an existing LAP when the OCP is changed?
Yeah, it's an ambition of this project to incorporate our LAPs to become formal extensions of the official community plan, so that we can enshrine those values. This is one of the things we're going to have to wrestle with a little bit in terms of the potential of looking at some areas as future growth areas at this time. Some other communities such as Squamish have recently sort of put in basically categorize certain areas for growth today versus areas that might be saying when that first area is built up to a certain extent, we would open up that next area. So there's some fairly large LAP areas where that might be the case, and that's something that we'll have to look at as we move towards a growth scenario land use plan. So that's one of many options. So I don't know that we're exactly equipped to amend all of our OCPs as part of this project. So it's something that we sort of have to wrestle into view in order to have a reasonable growth pattern going forward over the next 5 to 10 years.
Chris? Barb just had a clarification here. Hi, Rob. You read my comment but did not acknowledge it. By creating commercial space within communities such as Kingview, you reduce the need to travel to town. Is that not correct? And yes, that is correct. I'm sorry, Barb. I didn't quite understand what you had written there, so I do understand it now. And that's right. Yes, by creating these smaller nodes, yes, some of the trips would be reduced. So thank you for that. David has wanted to acknowledge Mona and the work that was done by the committee. Thank you for your efforts and participation in this important process. These are long-term complex efforts, but your thoughtful contributions to this process are much appreciated. Thanks, David. Okay, so if I could ask for, can we ask for no more questions, and then we'll try and get through the existing questions, folks. So we have 16 open questions. Let's try and get through these fairly quickly and let people go. The 7 draft goals presented, are they listed in order of importance or value? No, they are not. Regarding infrastructure costs, the services provided to our rural area are just water and garbage, no sewer, no sidewalks, no streetlights, but we pay a significant amount of property taxes. So wouldn't a bit more rural development be a good thing for North Cowichan's bottom line? That's, I think, a rhetorical question from Richard. How will public learn about possible changes in the UCBs, as there are people who own property now, purchased years ago with the possibility of perhaps developing that property? So the changes would be, advertised as part of this OCP process, and there is of course a full public engagement process on the draft OCP, as well as a public hearing. So there'll be plenty of opportunity, I think, to learn and understand about proposed changes, engage and provide your feedback on those proposed changes, and learn about decisions that council makes from the record of the public hearing and council's decisions. Would the multi-center scenario include higher density, duplex, with multifamily units in each center, including Chemainus and Crofton. Yes, there would be some higher density in those areas, but very limited, focused around the core, I would say. So, you know, it's not looking at multifamily across the whole community by any means. So very much a focused area for some higher density. Will childcare be included in the OCP? Now, Susie is a bit of an expert in childcare, so I'll let her answer that one.
Yeah, it absolutely will. It's a big part of that, and as we move through the policy updates, it'll be in one of the chapters for sure.
Thank you. Richard, I'm disappointed that planners feel that we need to control the location, density, and type of land use and development in a community. Shouldn't people have a choice where they want to live, work, and play? Why not allow more freedom for individual preferences and lifestyles? Urban cores like Cook Street Village, Qualicum Beach, and Oak Bay are all amongst the most expensive places to live. Where will the rest of the next generation live? And I think, Richard, I think we would say that if you just let anyone do anything they want, you end up with a lot of negative impacts to both people and landscape and ecology. And so there is a good reason to try and manage and control where density goes, because otherwise you end up impacting some of the values that people really love about the community. Bruce, what's a unit? And we use this term unit. Home, house, place to live is a unit. Mary, the Malatest child care study indicates necessary growth in childcare sites and spaces. When will those details be incorporated into the growth scenarios? Anybody know about the Malatest childcare study? Yeah.
Really good. It was a great study we did on the regional level, and Mary's right. It does indicate that. So I think childcare is something that needs to be at the center of all of our community development work, in terms of the official community plan, in terms of how do we appropriately service each community, and how do we do this currently. We provide a lot of opportunities for home-based childcare. The institutional or sort of the larger licensed childcares are a bit of a challenge in terms of getting them in, although we're not very restrictive on their zoning, and we also acknowledge them in our local area plans as well when we get down to that community level. When it comes to servicing childcare, certainly is a part of that conversation. So as Susie said, we'll certainly acknowledge it in the chapters, and we'll need to find ways to sort of beyond the policy level, beyond the objective level, we'll probably need to find ways to action that and find ways to incorporate that into future planning work, as well as the OCP.
Chris, Peter, would it be helpful to have an OCP based on process rather than puzzle, I think that says? For example, how does a plan affect the flow of people, food, money, taxes, and of course, energy? That's an interesting idea, Peter. You could almost have a Sankey diagram around for an OCP with the different scenarios. I think we'll just take that as an interesting idea right now. Is Modus going to be a consultant on decision-making regarding infrastructure and sorry, it's disappeared, infrastructure and budgeting? Well, we're only retained for the OCP process, so no, that would be done by district staff with council. Will the slides from
Rob, if I could just add, we do, as we move through this OCP process, we do consult with other senior staff, and as we get towards the end, we'll certainly be looking at developing a draft that is supportable. We'll certainly talk to senior staff that include their finance staff, and as we go through the adoption process, one of the legislative requirements is that we look at the consistency of the OCP with the 5-year capital plan. So there's some work that we need to do around that as we move through this process, but no, the pie is not launching into the sky. If anything, it's going to come crashing back down to earth in terms of financial, fiscal prudence around this OCP.
Thanks, Chris. Will the slides from this evening be included in the background materials for the survey? The material on the slides is basically the same as the package of material on the website, but also the recording will be put on the website as well. So you'll be able to see the slides. I guess we could also consider putting the PowerPoint itself on the website. So thank you for the suggestion, Sandy. Do you have a if there is less orange area, there must be larger buildings, right? Is a vote for less orange by default a vote for skyscrapers? Is a vote for less orange by default a vote for skyscrapers? So what orange means is a greater amount of growth and change. It doesn't necessarily mean high density. It just means that there is a higher level of change to that area. Bruce, subdivision, ? And young families who can't afford a house in a new subdivision. Right, so that's, Bruce, why we're trying to say that right now there's not a lot of choice in terms of the housing type, because it's mainly a single family community with some exceptions. And so some of the scenarios would see greater housing choice going forward in the future. Was there any consideration given to suppression of forest fires, especially given the climate emergency? Is that something that Rob or Chris? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can respond. The municipality has just started a wildfire protection review of the development permit area requirements for wildfire protection. So we are doing some parallel work on wildfire protection, and we'll be developing some policy and guidelines that will help with that. The land use planning that we're doing also will consider appropriate locations for new housing, which would give some consideration also to the wildfire interface area or the proximity to forested areas and the risk of wildfire.
Okay, thank you. Barb's asking me if I could pose a question to the community that has not been answered yet, or if you could pose a question to the community that has not been answered yet, what would it be? Barb, I can't think of questions. I'm in answer mode right now. And Joyce is asking a very specific question about planning for so-called affordable housing, 95 units in the parking spaces of Duncan Curling Club beside the extra. Joyce, I'm afraid that's just too specific for what we're doing tonight. Like, we're really talking about large scale growth management planning. So sorry, that's just too specific for us to answer. And Rhiannon, so why is Modus answering all the questions tonight? I would like to hear more from staff who have more concrete info. Hopefully, Rhiannon, you've heard quite a bit from Chris and from Rob as well, staff at North Cowichan. I was just trying to answer the questions I was able to answer. Okay, I think we have got to the end of our session. We still have 31 participants on the webinar. Want to really thank everybody for staying with us and for asking such great questions. Really appreciate it. I know we haven't been able to answer everything, but hopefully we've given you a good sense of these three scenarios and the differences between them and some of the implications. And we'd really like to encourage you all to participate and encourage people you know to participate in the survey. And hopefully we'll get a really good response from that, and it will give us some clear direction going forward. So thank you, everybody. And we're getting a couple of appreciative comments there from Sandy and Alan. Thank you. thank you all. So I don't know if
Rob,
Chris or Rob.
yeah, we're going to hand it over to Rob. He's going to do the final comments. And Mona, I don't know if you have any final thoughts. You didn't have much opportunity to answer, so go ahead.
You know, it was just terrific listening to the community come forward with as many questions as they did, and really reach out to your communities and get people to fill out the survey. We are listening, and everything you can feed back to us is extremely helpful.
Great, thank you, Mona, and thank you again for the work you did to support the generation of the scenarios. It was very helpful. Rob, over to you for final words.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So just a few things to wrap up here. We recognize that this survey is a bit more involved than most surveys typically are, and that there's a bit of effort and review in order to understand the scenarios so that you can do the survey. So thank you for that additional effort. We really do hope that you'll participate in the survey and have a look at those scenarios. And I and Chris and our planning staff at the municipality are happy to help if you have any questions or you're confused about aspects of it. Please reach out and we'll do what we can to try to help. We are going to be relying quite a bit on your responses in the survey to better understand this community's growth management preferences and priorities. And this is really why it's so important to participate in the survey. So please, let your friends and acquaintances and family know about this and invite them to participate, because the more responses we get, the better the quality of information we'll be able to use. So we hope that you've gained a better understanding of the OCP update project tonight, and again, hope you'll participate in the survey and also upcoming engagement processes. This isn't the only one. There'll still be further opportunity to provide input on the policies. That will be the next step. We'll be developing more detailed policy that the public will be invited to comment on. And in conclusion, I would just like to thank Modus for hosting the webinar tonight, and the panel participants. Thank you to everybody that participated tonight. There was really a great array of questions there, and I think that in itself gives us the flavor as to what people are thinking. Thanks again, and have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.